Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads. Back to the Future wasn't just a time travel comedy that dominated the summer box office of 1985. It was a production disaster that nearly collapsed, a career-defining gamble, and a behind-the-scenes battleground where creative vision collided with studio politics at 88 miles per hour. What audiences saw on screen, the seamless adventure of Marty McFly's accidental journey to 1955, masked a turbulent reality of fired actors, 24-hour shooting schedules, and desperate last-minute rescues. The film that launched Michael J. Fox to superstardom almost starred someone else entirely. The iconic DeLorean time machine. It was originally going to be a refrigerator, and the movie's cheerful ending sparked philosophical debates among its own cast about materialism and American values. Today, we're revealing 20 weird facts about Back to the Future that will forever change how you see this beloved classic, plus a bonus revelation that remained hidden for decades and explains why this film has such enduring power. So grab your puffy vest, lace up your Nikes, and make sure you've got 1.21 gigawatts ready, because you're about to discover the shocking truth behind the making of Back to the Future. Number 1. The script was rejected over 40 times. Back to the Future wasn't a slam dunk pitch. It was a desperate Hail Mary from two creatives with failing careers. Writers Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis had collaborated on 3 consecutive box office failures, and Hollywood was starting to see them as toxic assets. Their script about a teenager traveling back in time wasn't just rejected once or twice, it was thrown back in their faces by every major studio in Hollywood, over 40 times. Disney executives told them the mother falling for her son was too risque. Other studios insisted time travel movies never made money. Columbia Pictures executive snidely suggested they take it to Disney. It wasn't artistic vision driving this stubborn pair, it was survival. Zemeckis and Gale were watching their careers disintegrate with each rejection. When Zemeckis finally had a solo hit directing Romancing the Stone, suddenly Universal was interested. The script hadn't changed, just Zemeckis' commercial viability. The film that would gross $381 million worldwide and become a cultural touchstone was nearly buried in a studio slush pile, a victim of Hollywood's risk-averse mentality. What audiences didn't know when they cheered Marty McFly's return to 1985 was that they were witnessing the redemption of 2 filmmakers who had been written off by the entire industry. Number 2. Eric Stoltz was fired after 5 weeks of filming. The Marty McFly that captivated audiences wasn't the one who originally landed the role. For over a month, Eric Stoltz was Marty McFly. The dramatic young actor had impressed studio head Sid Sheinberg with his performance in Mask and was pushed onto Zemeckis when Michael J. Fox proved unavailable due to his family ties commitment. Stoltz wasn't just cast, he filmed for 5 grueling weeks. He drove the DeLorean, he traveled to 1955, he met his teenage parents. Over a third of the movie was completed with Stoltz in the lead role, but something was wrong, desperately wrong. The problem wasn't Stoltz's talent, but his approach. A devoted method actor, he insisted everyone call him Marty on set, and brought an intense dramatic weight to every scene, in a comedy. Cast members recall an uncomfortable tension building, especially with Thomas F. Wilson, Biff, who complained that Stoltz was physically hurting him during their confrontation scenes. On January 10th, 1985, Zemeckis made the devastating call. The film wasn't working and they needed to start over with a new lead, a $3.5 million decision that could have ended his career if it failed. Stoltz was crushed. The cast was stunned, and somewhere on a studio lot, footage of an alternate Back to the Future sits in a vault, a strange cinematic ghost that audiences were never meant to see. Number 3, Michael J. Fox filmed 2 shows simultaneously for months. The Back to the Future that saved the production wasn't just challenging to secure, it nearly killed its star. When Fox finally agreed to play Marty McFly, it came with a brutal condition. He couldn't miss a single episode of Family Ties. What followed was one of the most punishing shooting schedules in Hollywood history. Fox would arrive at the Family Ties set at 9 a.m., rehearse and film the sitcom until 5 p.m., then be rushed to the Back to the Future set where he would shoot until 2:30 a.m. After a few hours of sleep, he'd repeat the cycle. For months, Fox lost weight. He struggled to memorize lines. The exhaustion was so severe that crew members would sometimes find him asleep in corners of the set. On weekends, when Family Ties wasn't shooting, the Back to the Future schedule would shift to night filming, forcing Fox's body clock to constantly readjust. The Teamsters driving Fox home often had to physically carry the unconscious actor to his bed. What appears on screen as Marty McFly's youthful energy and perfect comic timing was performed by a man operating on 2 or 3 hours of sleep, fighting to keep his career-making opportunities from destroying his health. When audiences laughed at Marty's wild-eyed panic, they were watching a performer who was genuinely at the edge of physical collapse. Number 4. Crispin Glover's philosophical objections nearly derailed production. The eccentric energy that made Crispin Glover's George McFly so memorable wasn't just acting, it was philosophical rebellion. Throughout production, Glover vocally objected to the film's moral message, creating tension that would eventually erupt into a lawsuit and decades-long feud. Glover fundamentally disagreed with the movie's ending, where the McFly's happiness is depicted through material wealth. He argued that equating financial success with moral victory sent a terrible message, especially in Reagan's America. These weren't casual observations. Glover brought these concerns directly to Zemeckis during filming, leading to heated exchanges that impacted his relationship with the production. His method-acting approach further complicated matters. Glover lost his voice during filming and had to dub many of his lines in post-production. His unusual mannerisms weren't always what Zemeckis wanted, leading to the director instructing him to be more restrained in scenes as the older George. The philosophical disagreements planted seeds for a bitter conflict that would explode during the sequel, when producers used a combination of old footage and a prosthetic-wearing body double to recreate Glover's character without his consent, leading to a landmark lawsuit that changed Hollywood contract law forever. What audiences saw as George McFly's nervous energy was actually an actor in creative and moral conflict with the very film he was helping create. Number 5. The DeLorean was almost a refrigerator. The stainless steel DeLorean DMC-12 is now so iconic that it's impossible to imagine the film without it. But in early drafts, the time machine wasn't a sleek sports car, it was a refrigerator. Zemeckis and Gale originally conceived the time machine as a stationary device built from an old refrigerator, which would be hauled around on the back of a truck. Doc Brown would use the nuclear test in Nevada to power it, sending Marty back to the future. It was Steven Spielberg who vetoed this concept, not for creative reasons, but for safety concerns. He worried that children might climb into refrigerators to imitate the movie and become trapped. His intervention quite literally saved lives. The shift to a vehicle opened new narrative possibilities, and the distinctive DeLorean with its gull-wing doors offered visual drama that a refrigerator simply couldn't match. When Ford Motor Company offered $75,000 to use a Mustang instead, Gale famously responded, "Doc Brown doesn't drive a fucking Mustang." 3 DeLoreans were purchased from a collector and modified for different filming purposes. One for stunts, one for special effects shots, and a detailed hero version for close-ups. When production wrapped, these cars became some of the most recognizable vehicles in cinema history. The refrigerator concept wasn't completely abandoned. Spielberg would later use it in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where Indy survives a nuclear blast inside a lead-lined fridge. Number 6. The studio wanted to change the title to Spaceman from Pluto. Universal Pictures head Sid Sheinberg wasn't just involved in casting decisions, he wanted to completely rename the movie. After reading the script, he sent a memo suggesting the title be changed to Spaceman from Pluto, referencing the scene where Marty is mistaken for an alien. Sheinberg wasn't offering a casual suggestion. As the head of the studio, his ideas carried the weight of commands. The memo sent Zemeckis and Gale into a panic. They loved their title and knew Spaceman from Pluto would fundamentally misrepresent their film. Desperate to keep their original title without offending their boss, they turned to executive producer Steven Spielberg, who crafted a diplomatic response. Spielberg sent Sheinberg a note thanking him for the wonderful joke, saying everyone got a big laugh thinking he was kidding about the title change. Sheinberg, too proud to admit he'd been serious, never mentioned it again. The close call reveals how even the most fundamental elements of now classic films hung by a thread. The cultural touchstone we know as Back to the Future was nearly released under a title that would have altered its entire marketing approach and possibly its reception. When Marty McFly says, "Take that to the bank, spaceman," in an early scene, audiences have no idea they're hearing what almost became the film's actual title. Number 7. The clock tower lightning strike was a practical effects nightmare. The climactic clock tower sequence, where Doc Brown dangles from the hands of the Hill Valley clock while trying to harness lightning, wasn't just thrilling on screen. It was a practical effects challenge that pushed 1980s filmmaking technology to its limits. The sequence required Christopher Lloyd to hang from a real clock face 60 feet above the ground. While safety wires were used, the actor was genuinely suspended at dangerous heights, with wind machines blasting him to simulate the storm. Lloyd, who suffered from a fear of heights, performed much of this physically demanding stunt work himself at age 47. The lightning effects themselves were created through a combination of techniques that now seem prehistoric. Electrical arcs were generated using Tesla coils. The lightning bolt that strikes the clock tower was actually a metal pole that special effects technicians would illuminate with bright flashes. For the DeLorean's dramatic departure, leaving fire trails behind, the crew laid down channels of flammable materials that could be ignited in sequence. What audiences see as a seamless action sequence was actually filmed over several weeks, with each effect requiring multiple takes and different technical approaches. The final composite shots involved optical printing techniques that are now completely obsolete in the digital age. The sequence that seems so effortless on screen represents hundreds of hours of dangerous physical stunts, precise engineering, and now forgotten technical craftsmanship. Number 8. The Johnny B. Goode scene nearly broke Michael J. Fox. The Johnny B. Goode performance at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance appears so natural that many viewers assume Michael J. Fox was actually playing guitar. The reality reveals both Fox's commitment and the production's clever illusions. Fox could play guitar basics, but nothing at the level of Chuck Berry's iconic song. For close-ups of complicated fingerwork, a professional guitarist's hands were used as doubles. But Fox refused to completely fake it. He spent weeks learning to mimic the exact finger positions and movements, so his performance would be believable. The physical demands were intense. Fox had to simultaneously play, sing, and dance, all after working full days on Family Ties. To make matters worse, this sequence was filmed during his brutal dual production schedule, meaning he was performing this energetic number at around 2 a.m., having been awake and working for nearly 20 hours. The exhaustion is visible in certain shots, and Fox has since revealed he was genuinely at the breaking point during filming. What appears as Marty's exuberant performance energy was actually Fox pushing through physical collapse to complete the scene. Mark Campbell provided Marty's singing voice, while Tim May performed the guitar solos, creating a triple-layered performance, combining Fox's movements, Campbell's vocals, and May's guitar work, all seamlessly blended to create the illusion of Marty McFly's rock star moment. Number 9, the original Jennifer was completely recast between films. Claudia Wells, who played Marty's girlfriend Jennifer Parker, disappeared from the trilogy after the first film, replaced by Elizabeth Shue in the sequels. The behind-the-scenes reason reveals both Hollywood's ruthless business approach and a young actress's painful personal sacrifice. When Back to the Future Part 2 began production, Wells was dealing with a family crisis. Her mother had been diagnosed with cancer. Forced to choose between her career and caring for her mother, Wells made the heartbreaking decision to withdraw from the role that could have defined her career. Rather than work around Wells' schedule or delay production, the filmmakers immediately recast the role with Shue. To maintain continuity, they even reshot the closing scene from the original film with Shue replacing Wells, creating a strange cinematic overwrite where the original ending no longer exists in the official trilogy. This callous approach to recasting was standard for the era but seems shocking by today's standards. Wells essentially sacrificed her career breakthrough for her family, while the production simply erased her contribution and moved forward. Years later, when Wells returned to acting, she would voice Jennifer in the Back to the Future video game, reclaiming a small part of the role she had been forced to abandon under the most difficult circumstances. Number 10. The finished film was rushed into theaters. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal why the version of Back to the Future you know and love was never meant to be seen when it was. The film you cherish was actually rushed into theaters before it was fully ready, the result of a studio executive's impulsive decision. That nearly sabotaged the entire project. The original release date was planned for August 1985, giving the post-production team adequate time to complete the complex special effects and editing. But after a test screening in May generated overwhelming positive responses, Universal Studios president Sid Sheinberg made a unilateral decision to move the release date up to July 3rd, cutting post-production time nearly in half. This created a frantic 9-week scramble to complete work that would normally take months. Visual effects teams worked around the clock. Editors made crucial decisions under extreme pressure. The musical score had to be recorded at an accelerated pace. Some effects shots were simplified or abandoned entirely. Certain continuity errors remained in the film because there simply wasn't time to fix them. The pressure was so intense that several post-production staff later described it as the most stressful period of their careers. The rush to release wasn't motivated by artistic considerations, but by financial ones. Sheinberg wanted to capitalize on the lucrative July 4th weekend box office. This business decision prioritized immediate profit over creative completion, forcing compromises that the filmmakers never intended. What seems like a perfectly crafted film was actually a frantically assembled project, its rough edges visible if you know where to look. Number 11, the producers fought to remove The Power of Love, the iconic Huey Lewis and the News song. The Power of Love is now inseparable from Back to the Future, but studio executives fought to remove it from the film, nearly depriving audiences of one of cinema's most perfect musical pairings. Zemeckis and music supervisor Bones Howe personally approached Huey Lewis to write an original song for the film. Lewis initially declined, concerned about seeming like a sellout. After reading the script, he changed his mind and delivered The Power of Love, which perfectly captured the film's energy and themes. But when Universal executives heard the song, they pushed back hard. They wanted something from a more established film composer or a bigger pop star. They argued Lewis's rock sound wouldn't have mass appeal. They suggested alternatives that would have completely changed the film's musical identity. Zemeckis stood firm, insisting the song stay. His conviction was vindicated when The Power of Love became a #1 hit, received an Academy Award nomination, and became inextricably linked with the film's identity. Lewis even appears in the film as a school audition judge who ironically rejects Marty's band for being too darn loud. What seemed like a minor creative decision, the choice of a soundtrack song, revealed the constant battle between artistic vision and corporate control. Every element of the film, down to its musical backdrop, was contested territory where the creative team had to fight for their vision. Number 12. The Twin Pines Mall was actually a real shopping center. The iconic Twin Pines Mall, where Doc Brown conducts his first-time travel experiment, wasn't a movie set. It was a functioning shopping center called the Puente Hills Mall in City of Industry, California. This practical location choice created unique challenges for the production. Filming could only take place between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. when the mall was closed. This meant the entire massive night shoot, including the DeLorean's first-time jump, the Libyan terrorists' attack, and Doc's shooting, had to be captured during these brief overnight windows. The mall's management initially refused permission until the filmmakers agreed to repave the entire parking lot after production wrapped. The Twin Pines Lone Pine Mall sign was temporarily constructed for the film and removed immediately after shooting concluded. Local residents called police during filming when they heard what sounded like automatic gunfire in the middle of the night, the Libyans' weapons firing. Production had to be briefly halted while the situation was explained to responding officers. The mall scenes, which appear seamless on screen, were actually filmed over multiple nights with constantly changing weather conditions. The crew had to use massive fans and water trucks to maintain consistent appearance between shots. Today, the mall still stands and has become a pilgrimage site for fans, though it looks substantially different than it did in 1985. The J.C. Penney anchor store visible in the film is now a Round One bowling and amusement complex, while the famous parking lot has been reconfigured multiple times. Number 13. Christopher Lloyd nearly quit before filming began. Christopher Lloyd's portrayal of Doc Brown is so definitive, it's impossible to imagine anyone else in the role. Yet, just days before filming began, Lloyd was on the verge of walking away from the project entirely, convinced he couldn't do the character justice. After reading the script multiple times, Lloyd felt paralyzed by indecision about how to approach the eccentric scientist. He called his agent and seriously discussed quitting, feeling he couldn't capture the manic energy and brilliant eccentricity the role demanded. His insecurity nearly deprived cinema of one of its most beloved characters. What changed his mind was an unexpected flash of inspiration from an unlikely source. While rereading the script late one night, Lloyd suddenly thought of the wild-haired conductor Leopold Stokowski. This image, combined with Albert Einstein's theoretical brilliance and Lloyd's own improvisational instincts, finally unlocked his approach to the character. Lloyd's performance anxiety didn't end with pre-production. Throughout filming, he remained intensely self-critical, often believing his takes weren't working. Zemeckis had to constantly reassure him that his portrayal was exactly what the film needed. The uncertainty that nearly cost Lloyd the role ultimately informed his performance. Doc Brown's frantic energy, his sudden shifts in tone, and his manic enthusiasm all emerged from Lloyd's nervous exploration of a character he wasn't sure he could play. What audiences see as confident comedic brilliance was actually born from an actor's profound creative anxiety, making Doc Brown a character created on the razor's edge of artistic doubt. Number 14. The film's famous tagline was improvised. Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads. This iconic line, delivered by Doc Brown in the film's closing moments, has become one of cinema's most quoted phrases. What few people know is that it wasn't in the original script. It was improvised by Christopher Lloyd during filming. The original ending called for a more straightforward dialogue exchange about traveling to the future. During one take, Lloyd spontaneously added the now famous line, adding a flourish by lifting his glasses dramatically as he delivered it. Zemeckis immediately recognized the power of the improvised moment and kept it in the film. The line so perfectly captured the adventurous spirit of the story that it became the movie's tagline, appearing on posters and in trailers. The improvisation's impact extended beyond marketing. It was compelling enough that President Ronald Reagan quoted it in his 1986 State of the Union address. Reagan, a fan of the film, used the line to emphasize America's technological future, saying, "Never has there been a more exciting time to be alive, a time of rousing wonder and heroic achievement." As they said in the film Back to the Future, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." A moment of actors' inspiration became a cultural touchstone, quoted by presidents and audiences alike, proof that sometimes the most memorable moments in cinema history aren't carefully planned but spontaneously created. Number 15, Lea Thompson had to wear painful prosthetics. Lea Thompson's transformation from attractive teenager to middle-aged mother in the 1985 scenes required extensive prosthetic makeup that turned the filming experience into physical torture for the young actress. Each day before shooting the older Lorraine scenes, Thompson endured up to 3 hours of makeup application. The prosthetics included facial appliances to create jowls, neck wattles and wrinkles, plus body padding to make her appear heavier. The weight of these additions alone was physically taxing. The adhesives used to attach the facial prosthetics caused painful skin irritation, sometimes leading to rashes that had to be treated between filming days. The materials trapped heat against Thompson's skin, making her uncomfortably hot under studio lights. Most challenging was the restriction on movement. Thompson had to carefully limit her facial expressions to prevent the prosthetics from separating or cracking. Simple actions like smiling or frowning could damage hours of meticulous makeup work. For scenes where older Lorraine drinks heavily, Thompson's prosthetic jowls would collect the liquid, requiring cleanup between takes. She later described the sensation as like drowning slowly while trying to act. What appears on screen as a seamless transformation was actually a daily ordeal of physical discomfort that Thompson endured without complaint, knowing that her character's dramatic before and after appearance was crucial to the film's emotional impact. Number 16, the film's budget nearly doubled during production. What began as a modestly budgeted $14 million production ballooned to over $26 million by the time filming wrapped, a near-catastrophic increase that threatened to sink the entire project and end multiple careers. The budget explosion stemmed primarily from the decision to replace Eric Stoltz with Michael J. Fox, which meant reshooting approximately 5 weeks of completed footage. This single decision added about $3.5 to $4 million to the budget overnight. Other factors contributed to the financial bleeding. The complex special effects sequences, particularly the clock tower finale, ran significantly over budget, as technical challenges required multiple approaches. The DeLorean time machine proved more difficult to film than anticipated, with mechanical problems frequently delaying production. The dual shooting schedule required to accommodate Fox's family ties commitment meant paying crews for longer hours and maintaining sets for extended periods. Night shoots, which made up a significant portion of the filming, carried premium costs for both cast and crew. Universal executives began to panic as costs mounted. Zemeckis was called into multiple emergency meetings to justify the expenditures. There was serious discussion about shutting down production entirely rather than continuing to fund what seemed like a runaway financial disaster. The film's eventual massive success vindicated these costs, but during production, the financial pressure created enormous stress. What audiences experience as a seamless adventure was, behind the scenes, a project constantly on the verge of financial collapse. Number 17, the original ending was much more spectacular. The film's climactic return to 1985, with Marty racing the DeLorean to the clock tower lightning strike, was actually a scaled-down version of a much more spectacular sequence that was abandoned due to budget constraints. The original script called for Marty to harness the power of a nuclear explosion at the Nevada test site. This ending would have featured Doc and Marty infiltrating a nuclear testing facility, positioning the DeLorean at ground zero of an atomic bomb test, and using the enormous energy to power the time jump. The sequence would have included military personnel, restricted areas, and a dramatic countdown to detonation. Visual effects plans included miniature work and practical explosions that would have created a much more visually dynamic finale than the lightning strike. Production designers had already begun conceptualizing this sequence when budget reality forced a rethink. The estimated cost for the nuclear test ending was over $1 million, money the already over-budget production simply didn't have. Zemeckis and Gale returned to the drawing board and conceived the clock tower lightning strike as a less expensive alternative. This creative compromise actually improved the story, keeping the action contained to Hill Valley and giving the clock tower, which appears throughout the film, narrative significance. The change also allowed for more character-focused tension between Doc and Marty during the climax, rather than the external tension of military security and atomic explosions. A budgetary limitation led to what many consider a perfect third-act resolution. Number 18. The 1955 set was an existing Universal backlot. The idyllic 1955 Hill Valley Town Square wasn't built for Back to the Future. It was an existing backlot set at Universal Studios with a rich cinematic history dating back to 1948. Known as Courthouse Square, it had appeared in numerous films and television shows before Marty McFly ever skateboarded across it. Originally constructed for the 1948 film An Act of Murder, the set had been featured in everything from To Kill a Mockingbird to Gremlins by the time Back to the Future began production. Production designer Lawrence G. Paul modified the existing structures to create the specific 1955 aesthetic needed for the film. Filming on a working backlot created unique challenges. The production frequently had to coordinate with other films and TV shows using adjacent sets. Sound contamination was a constant concern, with takes often ruined by noise from nearby productions. The square has suffered multiple disasters over the years. A significant portion was destroyed in a 1990 fire that swept through the backlot. Another fire in 2008 damaged it again. After each incident, Universal rebuilt the square, partly due to its importance to the Back to the Future legacy. Today, the set continues to be used for filming, while also serving as a stop on the Universal Studios tour, where guides highlight its connection to the film. The courthouse clock, perpetually stuck at 10:04, has become one of Hollywood's most recognizable filming locations. What appears on screen as a perfect small-town America is actually a constantly evolving, frequently rebuilt filming location with a 7-decade history in American cinema. Number 19. Industrial light and magic created revolutionary effects. While Back to the Future isn't primarily remembered as an effects film, it actually pushed visual effects technology forward in ways that would influence filmmaking for decades. The innovative work was handled by Industrial Light and Magic, George Lucas's legendary effects company. The DeLorean's time displacement effect with electrical arcs, flashing lights, and fire trails in a case required entirely new techniques. ILM developed a combination of practical and optical effects that had never been attempted before, including specialized chemicals for the fire trails and custom-built electrical equipment. For shots of the car vanishing, ILM pioneered new compositing methods that allowed for seamless transitions. These techniques would later evolve into the digital compositing tools that became industry standard. The clock tower lightning sequence combined miniature work, full-scale practical effects, and optical compositing in ways that pushed the technological boundaries of mid-1980s filmmaking. Some of the equipment used was custom-built specifically for these shots. Perhaps most significantly, ILM's work on Back to the Future helped bridge the gap between traditional practical effects and the digital revolution that was just beginning. Many of the compositing techniques developed for the film would later be adapted to early CGI workflows. The film's effects supervisor, Kevin Pike, would later cite Back to the Future as a project that forced innovation due to its unique requirements. What appears as relatively simple special effects by today's standards actually represented cutting-edge technology at the time of production. Number 20. The film's ending created tension between director and star. The triumphant finale of Back to the Future, where Marty returns to find his family transformed into more successful, confident versions of themselves, wasn't received positively by everyone involved in the production. In fact, it created a philosophical rift between director Robert Zemeckis and star Crispin Glover that would have lasting consequences. Glover strongly objected to the materialistic nature of the McFly's transformation. He argued that equating happiness with financial success and possessions, like Marty's new truck, sent a troubling message about American values. He believed the moral of the story should be about family connection and love, not wealth acquisition. These weren't casual observations. Glover brought these concerns directly to Zemeckis during production, leading to heated debates about the film's underlying message. Zemeckis insisted the ending worked dramatically, while Glover maintained it was morally problematic. The tension extended beyond philosophical disagreements. When sequel negotiations began, Glover requested a salary comparable to other returning cast members, but was offered significantly less. Combined with his creative misgivings, this led to his refusal to return for Back to the Future Part 2. The producer's controversial solution, using a combination of old footage and a prosthetic-wearing body double, led to Glover filing a landmark lawsuit that established new Screen Actors Guild rules about using actors' likenesses without permission. What audiences experience as a happy ending was actually the catalyst for one of Hollywood's most significant legal battles over actors' rights and creative control. Bonus fact: the connection between Back to the Future and President Ronald Reagan goes far deeper than the film's joke about Reagan being president in 1985. The 40th president was so genuinely delighted by the film that he arranged a private White House screening and later referenced it in his 1986 State of the Union address. When Marty expresses disbelief to Doc Brown that Reagan, whom he knows as the actor, could become president, Reagan was reportedly so amused by this line that he asked the projectionist to stop the film, rewind, and play it again. He then instructed his staff to include the moment in his daily diary. In his 1986 State of the Union address, Reagan borrowed Doc Brown's famous line telling the American people, "Never has there been a more exciting time to be alive, a time of rousing wonder and heroic achievement." As they said in the film Back to the Future, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." The president's appropriation of this line wasn't coincidental. It perfectly aligned with his optimistic vision of American technological progress and future prosperity. The film's underlying themes of self-reliance, determination, and changing one's destiny through bold action resonated with Reagan's political philosophy. What began as a joke at Reagan's expense became a moment of cultural symbiosis, with the president embracing a film that, perhaps unintentionally, captured the optimistic spirit of 1980s America that he sought to embody. This presidential endorsement helped cement Back to the Future's status, not just as a blockbuster, but as a cultural touchstone that transcended entertainment to become part of the American political narrative. In the decades since its release, Back to the Future has remained not just a beloved film, but a window into a pivotal moment in American culture, when Hollywood dreams, technological optimism, and political messaging converged to create cinematic magic that still resonates today. The movie's legacy isn't just about time travel, but about how a film itself can travel through time, carrying the values and dreams of one era into the next influencing how we imagine both our past and our future.